in 1914, the first version of the State Water Resources Control Board was formed to sort out some of the problems that all the different water rights claimants were having with the different, their various water claims. And it became evident that the riparian water rights holders were trying to claim all of the water, and the appropriative water rights claimants were angry about that. So there was a big fight going on, and this ended up in a constitutional amendment that was on the ballot in the 1920s. And this was the constitutional amendment for against waste and unreasonable use of water. And it was to make sure that any water that was used by any of the claimants wasn't used wastefully or unreasonably. So the voters in the late 20s voted on this. I believe it was 1928, and it became an amendment to the California Constitution. It's known as Article 10, Section 2 of the California Constitution. And remember that, because it's a main tool that we have in order to protect our water for the public and for the environment. The other piece of this is the public trust doctrine. This is a very important concept in law that goes back to the time of Justinian in Rome in 300 AD. And this concept says that the water belongs to everyone. The water in the streams and the rivers and it belongs to everyone. It can't be claimed as a right, a property. It's not property. So this was passed on through English common law and became part of American law and was incorporated in this constitutional amendment in California. So the public trust doctrine is in the Constitution. It's in California law, and the reason it hasn't been used more is that to do the analysis required for figuring out what the public trust assets are is very costly. In water, the only time it's been actually done was in 1983 in a case called the Audubon case. And this is what saved Mono Lake. It was so clear to the city of LA once a public trust analysis was done that it would be much less costly for them to get another source of water rather than Mono Lake. So thus, and we need to remember this because this is what I believe is going to help save all of the rivers of the Delta watershed. So let's fast forward to where we are now. What is the Delta watershed? The Delta watershed is most of the rivers of northern and central California. It includes the Sacramento, the Feather, the Trinity, the American, the San Joaquin, the Merced, the Tuolumne, the Cosumnes, the Stanislaus, and the Kings rivers. That's a lot of rivers. The rivers that are on the north coast are all wild and scenic rivers, and they are off limits at this point. That doesn't mean that they are safe, though, because even in the last few years, Senator Dianne Feinstein has started to go after some of them, to delist them, to use them as sources of water for her friends in the Central Valley, the southern Central Valley. So it's really important that we understand that it's all those rivers that I named, those are on the chopping block. All three runs of salmon, the orca whales, and many more creatures are on the chopping block with the project that's now trying to be forced through. It's called the Twin Tunnels Project. And this has been something that was started under Arnold Schwarzenegger in the early 2000s and picked up by Jerry Brown when he was elected in 2010 as governor. And Jerry Brown is pushing it hard. I don't understand why. because it's going to cost way more than they're saying. Remember what happened with the State Water Project vote in 1991 in Santa Barbara, where they told us it would cost $270 million and it ended up costing $1.76 billion. We believe the same thing is going on with the twin tunnels. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the twin tunnels because I think it's really important for you to understand. The twin tunnels are two tunnels that are each 44 feet wide, big enough to fly a Piper Cub in, buried 150 feet underground and running for 35 miles. And just in rough terms, they run from the city of Sacramento to the city of Fresno. It's not exact, but there'll be a picture for you to see where it runs exactly. But it runs through earthquake-prone land, and the farmers who own the land in the Delta have been fighting for 5 years to keep the state off that land so that the state has no idea. They've never done any core drillings. Just recently, the court said that the state could come on and do the core drillings. But up until this point, the state has not done even core drillings. So how do they know how much it's going to cost? Because they have no idea what the materials are that they're going to be working with. They're saying it's going to cost $17 billion, and that does not include any environmental restoration part of it. We believe it's going to be closer to $100 billion by the time that it's done. The state is saying that this is not about any new water. They say this over and over again. It's not about a new water right. And this is what we're fighting about right now at the State Water Resources Control Board. They're saying it's no new water. It's just to make the water that's in the contracts now more reliable. And if that's the case, why in the heck would they spend upwards of $100 billion to give you the water that you already are expecting? Well, there's a problem even with that. And that is that when we asked the State Water Resources Control Board in 2009 to tell us how much water was in the Delta watershed that they were dealing with when it comes to all this, they couldn't give us an answer. When we're really sort of stunned, because here's the agency that's tasked with the fiduciary responsibility to grant and revoke all water rights, and they have no idea of how much water they're dealing with. That didn't make sense to us. So on our own, I had a researcher spend 3 years through Public Records Act and Freedom of Information requests to actually quantify how much water was in the Delta watershed. We compiled this in a lengthy report and submitted it to the State Water Resources Control Board in 2012. And the bottom line conclusion was, on average, there is 29 million acre feet of consumptive water available, and there are 153.7 million acre feet of claims on that water. Stop and think about it. That's 5.5 times more claims than actual water exists. That's a big problem. And then remember when I was talking about Miller and Lux and all the water rights fights over the senior water rights holders and the riparian water rights holders? Well, if you throw in the senior water rights component to this, the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project are among the most junior water rights claimants in this over-appropriated system. And if all of this actually was in court in an adjudication, it's likely that the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project would have very little water, perhaps no water. And politically, I think the reason we've never tried to sort this out is politically that would be a big, hard fight. So what CWEN is asking now, and what we need to do if we are going to keep the environment that we want in California, that we all want to live in, with healthy rivers and healthy fish and clean water, good water quality and good flows, we have got to bite the bullet and force the state to do an adjudication. of the surface waters of the Delta to actually quantify themselves what the surface waters, the amount of what's actually available. So they don't just keep making these, what we call, and the Third District Court of Appeal in our Monterey case agreed, paper water promises, because that is a recipe for disaster. And the environment has no voice except for people like us. So they're always on the losing end. That's why so many creatures are on the verge of being extinct. The salmon, the orcas, and the smelt, and many, many more plants as well. And it's just, well, let's put it this way. What we have to do is adjudicate, find out what's there, adjudicate the surface waters of the Delta with a public trust component. The public trust doctrine, as I said, goes back to the times of Justinian, and is all the way in English common law and American common law and now the California Constitution. We must have enough resources ourselves to do a public trust analysis because all of these public trust assets have an economic value, but they're never given an economic value by the state or by the contractors, because if they were, that would mean less water for them. They don't want that. So, and because of the senior water rights piece of this, the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project know that, some of those folks know that their days are numbered if any of this actually happens. So they're going to fight like hell to stop us. But I firmly believe that if we want to have a California for ourselves and our kids and grandkids, we have to get this done. So with that in mind, in 2009, CWIN started looking for expert witnesses to do this public trust work. And we found them in a group called Eco Northwest out of Oregon. And I went up there with one of our chief lawyers, and we interviewed them, and they are totally on board with us and have been on board since 2009. One of their team was on the team that did the public trust analysis in Mono Lake. And it's just going to cost a significant amount of money to do this. But we knew that at some point it would be time to get Eco Northwest in this. That time is now. And let me explain why. We started back in 2009 to fight the Delta Plan, which is the first piece of this. And we won. Our lawsuit, we won. They have to redo the Delta Plan because it was insufficient. Then the California Water Fix, which is what's going on now for the tunnels, the environmental impact report for that is now up. And we are prepared to sue on that as well. And the other piece of the California Water Fix is that it needs, for the tunnels, to get these tunnels built, you need to have at least 5 different permits. The state needs to have at least 5 different permits. And the one that we're deeply involved with right now is called the Change of Point of Diversion Permit before the State Water Resources Control Board. What this means is because they're going to change the place where they take the water out of the Delta to 35 miles upstream, they must get permission to do that and show first that there is no harm to any of the users, and second, that this is not a new water right. So we've been fighting. We got Eco Northwest to testify in the first phase of this in December, and they did a fantastic job. We want to get them to do, now we want them to do the public trust analysis on all the rivers, on the Sacramento, the Feather, the Trinity, the American, the San Joaquin, the Merced, the Tuolumne, the Cosumnes, the Stanislaus, and the Kings River. we need to get analysis, public trust analysis on all those rivers, on all of the creatures that are at stake, and give them an economic value so that it's not just about almonds, the value of almonds or the value of alfalfa, but it's about the value of clean rivers. It's about the value of having rivers that run. And, I think the public really cares about this, but I don't think they understand that that has been left out of the equation so far. The economic value of these public trust assets. That's why we need, CWIN has its public trust campaign to hire Eco Northwest, to raise the funds to hire Eco Northwest to get this analysis done. It's going to cost a lot of money. We've been told somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million. But to me, that's a drop in the bucket when you think of all those rivers and what it means for the future of California. So we are asking our friends and others to help us raise this money so that we can hire Eco Northwest and do the public trust analysis that needs to be done. We're going to use it at the change of point of diversion hearings in phase 2. CWIN also filed a pattern and practice public trust lawsuit in 2015. We've been trying very much to get at this public trust one way or another. And we filed that case in 2015, and it just recently, 6 weeks ago, cleared the procedural hurdles. And we now have a hearing date in August of 2017. And the work that Eco Northwest does on the public trust analysis would be very useful in that case. We also have another action where CWIN is before the State Water Resources Control Board in some required flow hearings that the state board has not had since 1995. By law, they must have these hearings every 3 years. Well, 1995 is a few more years than 3 years ago. They're doing it now, and they must produce what they call the Substitute Environment Document, SED. And it's about flows in the rivers and salinity concentrations. And the public trust analysis would be invaluable there as well. So we have many uses for this information, and it's all key to fixing the problem. Stopping the tunnels, we could probably stop the tunnels with what we've done so far in court, but it wouldn't fix the system. And why continue to decimate the system if we know we can fix it? CWIN has standing, we have the experts, and we have everything we need to do to not just stop the tunnels, but to fix the system. That's what the public trust fight is about. Fixing the system, saving all of those rivers, saving the fish, and saving our pocketbooks. Because spending $100 billion on something that's not going to produce any benefit is ridiculous. So it's a win-win for all of us.